If you've ever gone through the Canadian immigration process yourself, you know this exact feeling. It's this high stakes, high stress situation. You spend weeks, maybe even months, just meticulously gathering every single piece of paper. You fill out the forms, you upload every document on the checklist, and you finally hit submit.
Oh, absolutely. And then comes the wait. Months, sometimes a year or more. And then, yeah, the refusal letter arrives.
Ugh. And that moment, especially for a DIY applicant, it's completely demoralizing because you know you meet the criteria. So the question, the one that comes from this place of just immense frustration is always, I submitted all the required documents. Why was I rejected?
Right. It feels like there must have been some kind of mistake or that the system just isn't fair.
But the professional analyses we're looking at today, from thousands of these cases, they suggest the answer isn't some glitch. It's a fundamental distinction that almost every DIY applicant misses.
It really is.
Yeah. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack that exact misunderstanding. We're getting into why just following a checklist doesn't automatically prove you're eligible in the eyes of IRCC.
We're looking at how officers actually review these files, what they're really looking for, and why a submission that looks perfect on the surface can still, fail.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Where does this core misunderstanding even start?
Well, it begins with an assumption that is, it's logical, but it's ultimately wrong.
And what's that?
It's the belief that just satisfying the document checklist is the final task. Like it's a test, and you just have to answer all the questions. Exactly. The checklist is the syllabus. You check every box and you think, okay, I passed. So you assume that by uploading every file, you've met your burden of proof. Well, it begins with an assumption that is, it's logical, but it's ultimately wrong.
Which, of course, creates this perfect storm of confusion and anger when the refusal comes.
Totally, because in your mind, you did the work. You followed the rules.
But this is where we have to draw a really critical line between the effort and the result.
Right, absolutely. Think of it like this. There's an action, and then there's a result. Submitting documents, that's the action. You uploaded what the system asked for. It's a procedural step. But proving eligibility, that's the result the officer has to reach. Totally. Because in your mind, you did the work. You followed the rules.
So it's the conclusion they have to come to after looking at everything.
Yes, it's the certainty they must feel. The existence of a document isn't the win. It's what the document proves that actually matters.
And the applicant, of course, knows their own life story inside and out.
Right. You know your job duties, your travel dates. But the officer, they're a complete stranger. They only know what you explicitly show and explain to them.
So there's a huge gap there.
A huge gap. And here's the most important part of the whole process. The burden of proof is 100% on you, the applicant.
So if your documents raise questions or don't quite connect,
the officer is not required to infer anything. They don't assume, and they won't do an independent investigation to help you.
Wow, that completely shifts the goalpost. It means the officer isn't there to help me qualify.
No, they're there to make a decision based only on the evidence you presented.
But isn't there a risk that IRCC is basically asking every applicant to think like a lawyer? For someone doing it themselves, shouldn't there be some leeway?
It's a fair question, but all the professional analysis points in the other direction. The system is built for massive volume, so officers have to be objective.
Their job is adjudicative, not administrative.
Precisely, it's a decision-making role.
So that changes everything. If they aren't just ticking boxes on a checklist, what does that assessment process actually look like?
Well, first, you have to completely get rid of that mental image of an officer with a clipboard. That's not what happens. Officers are focused really intensely on whether your documents truly support and corroborate the claims you're making.
They're reading the whole thing like a single story, a cohesive narrative.
And that means consistency is king. It's the ultimate litmus test. They're cross-referencing everything.
And then check that against your pay stubs or tax documents.
Exactly. So a tiny, innocent mistake in one document can actually undermine your credibility across the entire file.
Can you give us a quick, concrete example of how that might happen?
Sure, let's say in your Express entry profile, you put that you finished your degree in June of 2018. But your official transcript shows your last grade came in December 2018. And your diploma says the graduation date was March 2019. And suddenly there's an inconsistency, a gap. Which date is right? Why the difference? If you haven't explained that, the officer has to pause. And that pause creates doubt.
And the doubt is the enemy here.
Exactly.
So what are the core questions these officers are asking themselves?
They're looking for that complete, logical, consistent chain of evidence. First, do these documents actually support the claim? Second, does the timeline make sense across all documents? Third, are there any gaps or unexplained issues? And finally, does this applicant truly meet the requirements of the specific program?
So they're analyzing the structure of your argument, not just checking if you have the evidence.
Precisely.
And this brings us right back to that tragic paradox we started with.
It does. Time and again, the failure is in the communication. The refusal happens because the officer wasn't satisfied that eligibility was clearly demonstrated.
So the person probably was qualified.
Yes, they had all the pieces, but the application failed to put them together into a clear, convincing picture.
And the consequences are huge.
Oh, the fallout is severe. Future applications face stricter scrutiny. Fixing it later costs far more than preventing it.
So how do you manage that risk before you hit submit?
This is where an IRCC document review comes in. It's a professional pre-submission assessment done from an officer's perspective.
And it's not a filing service.
Correct. It's not a guarantee. It's an investment in clarity, consistency, and risk management.
So it's really about prevention.
Exactly. The documents are the evidence. The application is the argument. And your argument has to be airtight.
So if you've listened this far, one thing should be very clear. Most DIY applicants who get refused didn't fail because they weren't qualified. They failed because their application didn't clearly communicate that qualification to the officer.
Exactly. And that's the part people underestimate. Not the documents themselves, but how those documents work together as a complete, logical case.
And this is where we want to leave you with something practical. If you're a DIY applicant, your documents are mostly ready, but you're not 100% confident how they look through an IRCC officer's eyes.
You don't necessarily need someone to file for you. But getting a professional, officer-focused document review before submission can help you catch clarity gaps, inconsistencies, and risk points you might not even see.
If that's where you are right now, you can scan the QR code on your screen to visit Fly to Canada's IRCC document review page. It's not a filing service, and it doesn't guarantee approval. Its purpose is very simple: to help you communicate your eligibility clearly, consistently, and effectively.
And if you're still in the learning phase, if you want to better understand how IRCC officers actually assess applications, what they look for beyond the checklist, and how real-world decisions are made,
you can also explore our IRCC Knowledge Hub through the link in the description. It's there to help you think like an officer before you submit, not after you receive a refusal.
Because prevention in immigration is always cheaper than repair.
You've already done the hard part by qualifying. The final step is making sure your application proves it without ambiguity.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.